So it can sometimes feel like you're trying to decide what ticket to use. I think having the back of your mind, okay, particularly this phrase I use, and I'm happy for you to use it, is credentialing dependent items. So really know the checklist inside out. So we're asking you to cover the whole of the curriculum with evidence, absolutely. But we're also telling you the following 15, 16 things are the credentialing dependent sections. So there's like 7 of them on the CAPS, there's the CMPs, the commons, some of them are highlighted on the checklist. So for those, you need to be absolutely sure that the evidence is excellent. We're not saying that for everything else, the evidence can be poor, but put most of your attention to getting these bits sorted. And sometimes it's like, what's the missing link? I know we bang on about triangulation all of the time, but that is because that's how you tell us that you've thought about it all, okay? So let's just take an example, see how we get on, right? So an adult male with right hip pain. Instantly you're like, okay, this is going to be a musculoskeletal ticket, okay? But you know, so the supervisor goes, oh, Ash, we're going to see a hip pain. Do you want to go and see it together? We can get a ticket. And you might say, nah, I've already got a ticket for hip pain. I've already covered off large joint examination. I've already covered off whatever else. There's so much more you can do. Maybe you have not got the right, maybe the missing bit of evidence in CC2, clinical examination, is that you haven't got a really good ticket that comments specifically on your examination. So you say, yeah, let's do this ticket, but I don't really want to focus on the fact that it's a hip. I want you to focus specifically on my clinical examination, how good it is. And you get the ticket to be all about CC2. You even use some of the words from CC2 when you send the ticket to your supervisor, and straight away, you've got that missing link for CC2 that you never knew you had. So every single patient can be utilized to what you need. It doesn't just have to be what it says on the tin, okay? Patient in pain, skills, fascia iliaca block, large joint examination for a DOPS, limb injury in the additional procedures, etc., etc. There's so much that can be used. Commons can be used for every presentation. So when you go through and curate your commons, try and identify the gaps that you've got. Actually, my CC3, which is medical therapeutics, is a bit weak on terms of like prescribing. For example, I've put my certificates in, but I haven't really got any tickets. So in this one, you say, can we do this ticket, boss? But actually what I don't want to do is focus on the examination. I don't want to focus on this shaking. I want you to focus on the fact that I gave him a multimodal pain prescription. I didn't give them morphine because I knew I was going to do a fascia iliaca block. And then suddenly the ticket is really geared around CC3. Just on tickets, there are the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, I'm going to show you some tickets. We need to be very mindful, or I need to be very mindful that they are my actual tickets. And this is not a criticism of any particular person. It's about getting the point across, okay, that some tickets, okay, are not worth their weight in gold. So I'm going to do a good one first, okay? It's a ticket that I sent to my supervisor. Okay, have a look at how much detail I've put in the case description. This is quite close to when I submitted for credentialing. So you could tell that I've gone, there's a missing piece of evidence in my PEDS curriculum. I've not quite got the right amount for pediatric mental health. So I've written in this ticket essentially exactly what I want her to comment on. So again, you have to read it in depth, but that's how much information you want to read. I've particularly said I want to focus on the Mental Health Act in adolescence, because I know that I can then also link that to CC 19, I believe, which was like legal care, legal, whatever it's called. And this is her reply, and it's not long, but it's perfect because she's picked out exactly what I want to talk about. I've highlighted action points because this is really important. You don't have to have nothing in this box. What we're not saying is every single thing. And note that she doesn't put, you need to go away and do. If she said you need to go away and do because you have got a gap in your knowledge, I can't then submit that to credentialing without having done it. But I can submit this to credentialing because she's just saying, hey, there's some useful materials here if you want to widen your knowledge. Can you see the difference? And you've got to educate your supervisor on how they write this, okay? I just want to check. This is another ticket that I'm going to call bad/ugly. And again, it's not a criticism of the person. I'm worried the person's name might be on the ticket, and I don't want this to be a witch to the person. So I might just unshare my screen for a second and come back to you. But essentially, I'm going to tell you the story of a case where you could have really, really got. So I was in resus and I took over the resus on a night shift of 7 patients who were all a bit complex. And if you've ever worked in my workplace, and most of yours, it's like it was a Monday night, there was no room to breathe, it was mental. and I was about to send the patient home, who I was handed over. She's absolutely fine. So young adult, young male, young adult female and male, 17 years old, RTC, very, very bad RTC, very bad crash. The male gets brought in by HEMS. The female comes in a wheelchair because she's got a broken wrist. Okay, completely biased and triaged to ambulatory because she had a broken wrist, despite the fact that the chap got a trauma call. He had a broken neck, some broken ribs, lots of other broken things. I was asked to see her and send her home because her arm had now been fixed with a sedation. Okay. When I went to see her, she was like, yeah, my head's a bit sore, my neck's a bit sore. So, oh, gosh. And my handover was, she's done, the notes are written, she just needs to be sent home once the x-ray's done. Obviously, I re-CT'd her because I'm, unlucky with these things. She turned out to have a really unstable C7 fracture, etc., etc. The point of their story is the consultant was like, oh my goodness, she could not sing my praises enough. Oh my goodness, this is amazing. You've picked this up. We could have sent her home. This is great. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's really going to be a really good ticket here for this. This is brilliant. I'm going to get a really good ticket. And I sent off ticket with that much information. And I said to her, actually, I've got quite a lot of tickets already for traumatic spine or whatever you want to call. Can I really focus on my decision making here and how I actually reassess the patient and that kind of stuff? And you can see from there that I've written that about, really what's the next step in kind of senior trauma management. Now I'm going to unshare my screen very briefly, just until I check what I've written for the next. So I haven't given someone away. I haven't. Brilliant. I am kind. Okay. Just share that screen quickly again, guys. So you would expect, you might be sat here thinking you wouldn't expect, but I was expecting a ticket back that was basically going to big me up, really big me up. And this is what the ticket said. So question for you guys, okay? And I'm going to stop sharing now. Would you link that to evidence? Would that be one of your crucial bits of evidence, do you think? What do you reckon? Feel free to come in and show. And why not? What's wrong with that?
I would. Even though now I'm worried, I would.
Who's saying that?
Simon T.
Okay, you would or you wouldn't?
Yeah, because of what I'd written, I would put that in there that they've ticked all the successfuls and then put, gave me limited feedback, but I've written it up from my own reflection and like how I found all this, the description and the learning points I got from the job, that I thought that would be okay.
Okay.
Worries me now.
No, don't be worried. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. What you've just said is answered the question, haven't you? So what I'm saying is don't just stick that ticket in as your only evidence for spinal trauma, for example. But what you've just said is perfect. You've said, actually, the ticket might not be brilliant in terms of feedback, but you can reflect on it. As you say, you've written your blurb in the ticket you've sent, and you could do a reflection how tricky the case was, but you might choose wisely what you link it to. So actually, you might choose to link that one to spinal trauma as opposed to overall senior decision making, because there's no comment on the overall sort of senior decision making, essentially.
Ash, I've got a quick question.
Yeah, come in.
I've had it the other way round, right, where I've done a DC cardioversion on a live patient, because that's what the old RKM portfolio wants. And the actual DC cardioversion was epic. It was my best one. And I sent off this ticket. And then the consultant sent the ticket back, and he basically focused all on the sedation and the learning points around sedation. Can I submit that? Because my actual DC cardioversion was really good, but everything that looked like it was crap was around sedation, but I actually didn't do the sedation. Or can I just reflect on it?
You need to go. So if the skill that you did in that episode was the cardioversion, so if you... Hopefully you didn't do the sedation and the cardioversion.
No, exactly, yeah.
So you didn't do the sedation, so the sedation need to go back. And this is where you sometimes have to be quite brave as trainee ACPs, because it can be really awkward. Historically, we're all nurses and paramedics and backgrounds where we would never have said boo to a goose to a doctor. And physios, sorry, I'm bad. PhDs. So you actually have to take yourself back. You have to be brave enough to go back to consultant and go, this isn't good enough. How you word that, okay, is interesting. But you say that you could say to him, that ticket we did, all I really wanted was an assessment. You've got to be nice about it because you want the ticket at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But you want the ticket to be relevant. Okay.
All right.
Can you go back into that ticket then and re-alter it or not?
No, you need to resend it. You basically need to, if the ticket's not good enough and you need a new one, you need to send a new one. But
Okay.
you can sit down with the person and do that. The other thing you can do is if you get what I would call a bad ticket or a ticket you're really not happy with, you can keep the ticket and then do another ticket or a reflection focusing on the ticket. So I got a ticket that I wasn't expecting once in terms of it sort of really highlighted a lack of knowledge for me in a certain area. So rather than like unlinking it and trying to hide it, I kept it in there and did a reflection called reflection on the depth of my knowledge around this subject. So I've gone away and done X, Y, and Z, because you can kind of own it, you know. Right, we're going to go back into the slideshow now, unless there's any other burning questions. Anything on Slido that anybody can see that really needs answering right now? Yeah, Amy, you've got your hand up.
No, it was just an itch. Sorry.
Right, great, excellent. Hi, Amy, brilliant. Just an itch. Right, Julie, I'm going to hand back over to you now, matey. Let me get some slides up for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about, we've sort of already done this actually.
Yeah, we are, yeah.
Any of these slides that you really want to bring up?
Just the first one there. So as Ash said before, this is your checklist. So has everybody got this on the front page of their Kaizen portfolio? And have people started to open this up? It's really important, even even now, to start looking at this and actually opening it up, because it does tell you as you go through each one of them, especially as you get down to the common competencies and your presentations, which, like Ash said before, there's a number of acute presentations on there that have to have evidence, and they're the really strong ones that you have to have evidence in there. So it's a really good idea to actually start looking at the checklist and opening it up while she's doing it there. So if you go into the, which is, as Ash has done there, into your acute presentation, so your abdominal pain, and it just, if you go up a little bit, Ash, it actually tells you what the consultant summative assessments using CBDs or mini KEXs. You can use ACATs, but it has to be by a consultant. Do you understand what I mean? It's actually telling you in that descriptor what they actually want from you. And I think it's a point where, even I'll say it when we do the supervisor session as well, the supervisors need to read this at this point. It's no point just reading it when they're coming to sign you off for everything and sign the checklist off. And I think that was some of my learning that I learned about 12 months before I submitted, was I started to realise that a lot of my work, I hadn't read enough in the guidance. So if you start to read the guidance as you're going along, and as Ash said before, you just keep needing, it becomes your Bible. Your whole of that curriculum is your Bible, and that extra document guideline becomes your Bible. And therefore, then you can start to realise as it's coming nearer to the end what you actually need to do. Just if you click on the next slide. So it shows on there what you need to do. So I've just put some things to talk about. So obviously the career pathway, you need your CV, we've talked about that. Your academic competencies, Ash will talk about them, but you need to link them into this. Your structured training reports covering the 3 years. I had 3 training reports in mind. I think I'll show you an example in a minute, and the same with the FEGs. I'll stay to that. I'll move on to that in a second. Your common competencies, again, it'll tell you what you actually need. So in CC 19, you need your safeguarding adults and children's. You also need to think about is in them common competencies, there's, thanks, Ash. Yeah, so you need to be reading what they want, because there's also one where you need your good practice for research, and that's about three hours of your life you'll never get back. So actually you need to do that certificate now while you've got time, because when you're getting nearer to the end, say coming up into the end to August, September, you won't have time to do any of the courses. So if you start, and you won't have time to get your safeguarding done again, because if you, at my trust, it's a day's course. So make sure that these things are already done now before the pressure really hits in the next 12 months.
If you haven't got the checklist on your Kaizen, write this on your paper right now that you need to email Rachel today. That's an easy job for RChem to do, and we're still aware some people, if you haven't engaged with Kaizen as much as you might have, and now you're suddenly focused on it, it might not be on your homepage, but we can easily get that added. Sorry, Jules.
No, you're all right. It's good. So that you can move on now, Ash, to the next one. So this was just where I was trying to set sure about linking in. So that's about airway management. We've gone to the next one. And then that shows I put a Mini-Kex and link that Mini-Kex to that evidence. Just because I'm not in control of my own slides, and then this one is it. So what I was trying to explain on this is about your practical procedures. So when you click onto the practical procedures, it tells you all about what practical procedures you can have, you need, who needs to sign them off, whether there needs to be a DOPS, and I shall show it again, and it just guides you. This is where you and the supervisor need to start looking at now, because it'll get too late.
So you can see there, it tells you the goal description, what you need, and it tells you what you need to link to here. So it tells you whether it needs to be a DOPS or a consultant CPD. So for all of these all have to be DOPS.
Yeah. And some of this you can start doing now. It can all be linked in.
Cool.
The DOPS, the PP11 DOPS for airway protection, there isn't actually a DOPS for that on the Kaizen assessment. So can we is it just generic?
I use DOPS basic airway management there, mate.
So obviously on the basic airway management though, that has a whole specific form to fill out.
Yes.
With that's around basic airway, but the PP11 is around airway protection, not the knows how to use the O2.
No, so you can basically, I use that form because that particular DOPS. So one of the things about airway, and we're aware of that, there's 3 different airway cover off things for this curriculum. So you've got PP11, you've got basic airway management, and you've got ACP3, airway, whatever the other one is, there's 3 of them. By the end, my supervisor's curriculum item rating was, as I've already identified, please see PP11, because she ended up writing sort of the same thing. We felt like it was a covering off the same things. So the reason why I've used that ticket is I think I've probably linked that ticket to both of those things, because in that ticket he talks about basic airway management and airway protection. As long as it doesn't matter whether you use a generic DOPS or that airway DOPS. The reason for doing that airway DOPS is it does ask the relevant questions, but then your consultant can write in there actually about airway protection and pulling out the things from the sort of curriculum item rating.
So do you need to get a basic airway management DOPS as it is there, or can I use a generic one that covered airway management? Does that make sense? Like the ones that are on the front screen, do you have to use those ones? Are they no?
So it says it in the goal description. Consultant summative using DOPS. If it was a specific DOPS, it would say specific DOPS, like it does in chest pain and stuff.
Okay.
So you can use any DOPS for that, as long as it covers what it needs to cover.
Thank you.
Okay. Jules?
So some top tips from me is read all the guidance that's available regarding the checklist and the curriculum. Meet with your supervisor as one of you when you get back into work, or if you email them and try and get a date in the next few weeks to sit down and just for both of you to go through your checklist. And that was sort of key for me, because my consultant because we were on the changeover from ePortfolio to Kaizen. He didn't know, honestly, he hadn't, and so we had to sit down and go through it ourselves and work out what needed to be done. So meet with them as soon as possible to go through your checklist, identify any gaps that you have and start to work on them as soon as possible. When the supervisors need to comment if there are any gaps or aspects of the curriculum that's only partially achieved. So in your practical procedures, if you haven't done the lumbar puncture yourself, which the majority of us won't have done, but that's fine. If it's a CBD like Ash talked about before, it's fine, but just to comment on that. I had 3 structured training reports, but they were done over 2 years, because my first one, I had a problem with my supervisor. But it was documented it was all documented, that it was done over just over 2.5 years, and the RChem panel accepted that, and we put the reasons why that happened. Always use your best piece of evidence for that actual curriculum item. Really think about, like Ash was talking about. So I'd run a cardiac arrest, and the patient, unfortunately, we got Ross, but she wasn't going to go to intensive care. We had lots of issues and the family came in, and I dealt with that aspect of it and put a not for resource and made comfortable. The actual ticket was nothing to do with the cardiac arrest. It was all to do with the decision making. So try to focus your tickets onto what you're missing in your curriculum that you haven't got a really good piece of evidence for. Another one I used was around the back pain, which I'd got numerous back pain tickets for, but actually this was all about taking a history from someone with back pain, having to do a PR examination who didn't speak English, and we had to use a language line. So I actually focused the whole ticket onto communication. So try and think when you're doing a ticket, what is it you need to do? And so by actually going back over your curriculum and looking now what tickets you've got, what you could could link to your checklist, will then give you identify your gaps in practice, and then you've got time to start thinking about them and how you're going to get that information in them tickets, especially when you're looking at your common competencies. The common competencies, a lot of people leave to the end when actually they're quite difficult, some of them, to get the evidence for in a ticket. Link your ESLA and your ACATs to the relevant common competency. Ash, move down one, I think I've shown on there. So that's about my my faculty governance, and just that they made a comment around that, saying that why there was 3 over 2 years, not 3 over 3. And then the next slide just shows you where to link in about, so your ACAT and your ESLAs need to be linked into the relevant sections. You can link them to other things, but when you go through, it tells you.
Where is it?
It's on
CC4. Here.
CC4.
You've got CC4 and CC8. It says in here at least 2 ACATs and 2 ESLAs to cover both of these. So the way we did it was I picked the best ESLA and the best ACAT for CC4, and the best ACAT and the best ESLA for CC8, because it says in them what you know. So in CC4, you want to realistically pick out which of your ESLAs or ACATs says the right words, and that's how we did it basically. And again, go on.
Yeah, and remember what this is talking about time management and decision making. So it needs to be about that. Your ESLA needs to be about the ACAT needs to be about that. It needs to be all focused in about your time management skills and your decision making skills. And maybe you've been given advice to more junior staff. So really think about what you want that ticket to link to, rather than thinking, oh, it's just that, because that doesn't, you're not getting the best out of them.
Cool. Really quickly on the academic declaration, I'm only going to spend a couple of minutes talking about this, okay, because it really worries a lot of people, and I'm aware of that. So, one second.
Yeah, Ash, just before you go on to the academic, can I just, there's a common question that's coming up about the checklist. Would you mind if I just respond to that?
Please.
A lot of people were asking. A common question that's just coming up a lot on Slido and in the chat is, if you've started off intending to credential in both adults and peds, and then you do something which is really, really common, is that you find that it's too much to do both, and you want to drop the peds and just work on the adult, and whether you need to do anything with your e-portfolio. So you will do. So what if you can email me at acp@rchem.ac.uk, there's no problem. What we have to do is change over your role on the e-portfolio, and we have to change the checklist on your dashboard. So if you've got a dual checklist, we need to replace that with an adult one. If you've already been linking to that checklist, you will have to relink unfortunately to the adult one, it won't do it automatically. However, what we don't need you to do, we don't need you to change to an adult curriculum. So what you will do is you will just carry on collecting your evidence on the dual curriculum, your adult evidence. On your checklist, it will say that you're just doing adults, and that's the only evidence that the panel will look at. And that means that you can pick up your Ps at a later date as well. If you were to if we were to give you an adult curriculum, it would mean that you would need to manually relink every single piece of evidence from the dual to the adult one, which is too time consuming and unnecessary. So you'll keep your dual curriculum, carry on collecting your adult evidence, but we will change over your checklist. But if you want to contact me afterwards, I can talk you through it.
And I think that's a really valid point, and actually lots of my friends who are going through, my advice to them now is to do adults only, because time is running out, and what you don't want to do is get so stressed trying to collect both. Ruth Brown, who's the chair of the ACP panel, doesn't like dual credentialing. So there's only 25 of us who have dual credentialed, and I got an immediate resubmission, and I haven't met a single other person who dual credentialed who got through first time, because always your adults are okay, but it's the peds that you haven't given enough evidence. And so it was doable for me, but it did mean I had that stress of that's okay for adults, but you've now got to do more stuff for kids, which is fine. I hadn't told the panel what they needed to hear. So James, you've asked a question about can you pick up at a later time? Absolutely you can. The only issue is you would then go on to the new curriculum. So it's slightly frustrating. My personal advice is getting a credential in adults, you don't necessarily need to get a credential in peds. You might want to for your own personal thing, and that is totally fine. But every credentialed ACP, so the new style curriculum, even on the adults only curriculum, it has a section called peds, because if you work in a DGH where you see kids, even if you're a credentialed ACP, you're working at a level of a reasonably senior clinician, you should be expected to have to see kids if they turn up at the door. You might not, that might not be your chosen area. Because I've got a dual credential, I'm able to kind of work in paediatric EDs, and I've got a dual kind of contract in my current role. But again, for the generic, people working in a normal smaller ED that isn't a specialist centre, then you can. So just in answer to your question, James, yes, you can. You might not use it to credential on the new, but what you'll get once you've credentialed in adults is you'll then ask for a transition to the paediatric curriculum on the 2022 curriculum, and all of your evidence will still be there, and you could go through linking it to those. And if you desperately wanted a new challenge, you could then look to credential in peds. Again, the minimum is 3 years for new people, because you've been doing it for a long time. That will be taken into consideration. As long as you could evidence that you worked looking after kids as part of your clinical journey for longer that time, then you'd be fine to do it. But my personal advice would be keep seeing kids, keep gathering evidence on kids. I'm not saying don't go to peds ED, but for a credential, get your credential through for the kind of the minimum that you need to do, would be my advice. And do you got any big questions on that? Thanks, James. Yeah, does that answer everyone's question on that? It's not a lesser to not credential in adult and peds. You're still getting an RChem credential. Okay, right. Academic declaration, super quickly. Every single person I speak to says this is the thing that confuses them the most. Okay, obviously I had to get a dog picture in there for you all. It's not my dog, but never mind. So everyone's like, I just don't get it. This academic declaration seems like a tick box exercise. In some ways, it is a tick box exercise. We're not sorry about that, because we have to be reassured that you've done the academic level, right, correct level for credentialing. So the form in Kaizen looks like this. It's the same form that used to be a paper form, or it used to be it used to be a thing you filled in, you downloaded from the RChem website, you completed it, and then you uploaded it to your library. The only difference is now it exists in Kaizen. So if you go into Kaizen, you go to the plus, and it's down here somewhere over the rainbow. Academic credentialing declaration is what it looks like. It's the same form that it used to be. My top advice is remember the standards for RChem credentialing are at least on the 2017 because it's going to change later. For you guys, it's only 2 years. So you need to have done at least the PG DIP in advanced practice, and it needs to have included a module on history taken in clinical exam, clinical diagnostics or words to those effects, and prescribing. Those are the 3 mandated modules. These are the 3 modules they're going to ask about in this form. If you have already done those modules and you're thinking about credentialing in the next year, do this form now. Do not leave it till the last minute. It will take you a couple of hours to fill in. It is a bit laborious. More is more, I always say, not less is more. So the more information you can get in there, the less the panel are going to go looking at the course you've done. If you just put a random certificate in from, you know, Mr. Smith's university, then we're going to go looking to see if that course is actually a course. If you put all the information and links to the web page, it might be that you're a bit like probably most of us I did a master's before I started the ACP pathway, and so the university that I did mine at has now changed a lot of the modules in terms of titles, but they're the same modules. And so I just posted the current links, but then I inserted what the learning objectives were when I did it to prove that it was still history taken in clinical exam, but here's the modern day link to the website. Moving forward, you'll be glad to know we're going to get rid of academic declarations, hopefully, because HE, hopefully, and the RCN and all those people will validate digital badges in advanced practice. And if you've done a modern day advanced practice course, you won't need to do this, but we're all a little bit stuck. Couple of hands. Claire, go.
Hello, I've already completed the form that was out before for the
Fine.
academic declaration. So do I still need to fill in this or no?
Fine.
Fine.
The form is the form. The form is the form. Just check that's right, Rachel. As long as you link it, I think that's okay, isn't it?
There is an old form that I've seen some people have found somehow. So if you have completed a paper version, make sure it is the paper version of the current form on Kaizen. Because I have seen one around, someone tried to submit one a little while ago that was an old one and didn't include all the details.
What I would say, Claire, is if yours is the right one, it is the same question. So you could, unless you've done it by written, which will be a bit of a pain in the bum, but if you've done it on a computer, you could just copy and paste into here. But it's effectively the same form, it's just built into Kaizen.
Okay, I'll have a look. Thank you.
You can link it if it is the current, if it was the latest version that was just moved on to Kaizen, then you can link the paper form. But if it's an old form, then we would ask you to do a new one.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
Anita.
Yeah, don't worry. Mine was exactly the same question because I've done mine on an old form, so it's answered that. Thanks.
No worries. Amy, is it an itch or an actual question? Nothing.
That wasn't an itch, it was a question. So
right.
I did the PG DIP down in Bournemouth, Ash, as you know, because I did it 2011. There wasn't a prescribing module as part of it. I then went on and did my prescribing additionally. Do I just stipulate that in the wording and link both of those? Yeah, that's fine. That's kind of what I thought.
Because when you go down the form, it's going to ask, this form doesn't ask about prescribing, I don't think, because prescribing is slightly separate. With prescribing, you don't need to provide a lot of information because you're going to provide a screenshot of your NMC that proves you're a current prescriber.
Yeah.
The module content and the learning objectives that they ask in this form, the reason for this form is there's a lot of courses out there, a lot of universities who offer a history taking course and don't cover history taking, or they don't do it properly. So the really complex questions in this form are really about the diagnostics module, the history taking module, where they really want to narrow down. So when you link to the checklist, you're going to link your prescribing screenshot from the register is what it tells you to do. So you need to link a screenshot of the NMC that says you're in date and it says you're an active prescriber. You're going to link your academic what's the word I'm looking for? The transcript, so the credits. And if that hasn't got prescribing on it, you're then going to link your prescribing certificate from the uni as well. Leave them no questions. If you leave them no questions, they'll ask you none.
But the other thing is, it stipulates on that form about assessment of all ages, and my course was specifically adults. That's not going to go, because obviously now I've shifted onto the adult curriculum rather than adults and peds. I'm sure there was, that one there.
So I think,
all ages.
yeah, That's a good question, Amy. I don't actually know I mean, for me, my thought process would be put all the information you can in the form. In the resolution comment for that, just write, my course was an adult course, but because I was seeing kids in my clinical practice, which you were, and I remember you were, I provided multiple workplace assessments in CC1 as taken. Make sure you've got something in CC1 that proves you can take history in a kid.
Right.
Rachel, would that sound all right?
Yes, yeah, I think it's fine if you've got it'll just be a sort of general sort of obviously establishing a history. So I mean, it's going to be apply really. If you want to add some extra, if the learning outcomes of the modules that you've studied, this is just to everyone, if it's very clear from the learning outcome, then you just need to literally cut and paste the learning outcome from the module to that area if it's really clear that they match. If there's any sort of, for those that, as Ash said, if there are ones where it doesn't kind of, you know, you're a bit concerned, just add some extra information just to reassure the panel where you can.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if it's a level 6 prescribing now, as long as you've got that annotation on your professional register, that's fine.
I'm just conscious of time. We did have a little gap out, so we can go for a couple of minutes. Obviously, if people have to go, then you have to go. That's fine. This is always the case with these because there's so many questions. So I just hope we can answer yours. Julie, can you do this next part really quickly?
Yeah.
Go.
Where's my slide?
Oh, we're not shaking. Oh, sorry.
I can't get my own up because you're on my screen.
You can see it, can you?
I can see. Yeah, just go to the next slide.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thank you. So some really important points. Your supervisor needs to have attended a supervisor day, and honestly, not the last few weeks before you submit. They really need to be on that course now, or already done it, or they need to, at a push, need to be on the next one. I would suggest, Rachel, I might be wrong, but you need to have they need to be actually being actively involved in supervising you throughout the journey. And so the person who's going to sign you off can't just sign you off and not done any tickets or done any part of your structured training reports or anything throughout this 3-year journey. They need to be your supervisor. Mine, I set off with one person, but within 12 months it didn't work. So I had the same supervisor for the last 2 years. They need to be reviewing the evidence prior to the ACP checklist being submitted, and they need to be involved in your FEGs and understand the terminology to be used when they do the final FEG as well. Just move on, Miss Slides, Ash, please. Just a little bit about your PEM consultant. If you're doing paediatrics, then they need to be on the GMC special register and member of the RCPCH in good standing and recognised as a GM supervisor and completed the AS supervisor training. So it's just, you've just got to be very wary of these statements, and your supervisor needs to be as well, because you don't want to get right to the end and submit and you haven't got the correct, they haven't got the correct qualifications. Next slide, Ash. I noticed this when I've been reading back up over some things, because I submitted in 2021, that your FEGs now need 4 consultants present at each meeting. One thing I will say, and we didn't realise this when I was at North Manchester and there was 2 of us going through at the same time with the same supervisor, your supervisor needs time to prepare for submission. So if you were going to submit now in September, your supervisor needs to be negotiating time with off the shop floor to do this work. A lot of the curriculum item ratings that they have to do and the checklist that they have to do, it needs time. It's not going to be done the day before. Because just like you're writing the curriculum item ratings, they need to document in that curriculum item rating, they need to be reviewing your evidence. So you need to start having them conversations with the supervisors and saying you need time out. I've talked through that, and Ash, it's fine. That just what you also need to probably sit down with your supervisors as well to discuss what's expected of them when they're writing their curriculum item ratings. So as Ash has shown, as I've shown, you know, good, past, satisfactory isn't always what they want to hear. They want an understanding of why you're good at what you do. So in this one, it's saying that I'm confident using BiPAP and CPAP, and I've been an author of the guidance. So they're sort of also saying that I'm competent and the reasons why I'm competent. So you just got to be, it does take a bit of time for them. It's not an easy process. You can move on, Ash, to the last slide, yeah, please. And then this, and it's one that Ash put up earlier. This is the Bible, and for you and your supervisor. This is the current data. Even though it's the 2017 curriculum, it gets updated every few years. So the one that I used has been updated again, and it provides you with everything that you need to do and your consultant supervisor needs to do before you go on to credential and submit. So if you could go away today, and for me, my take-home messages to all of you is go back to work, get a meeting with your supervisor, talk through your checklist, talk through what evidence you need, you're still lacking, look at your curriculum item ratings, get some of them signed off if they can sign them off now, if you're going to be submitting in this window or next window. Start making sure that your ESLAs and your ACATs are up to date, and that all your structured training reports and your FEGs are already, you're ready to go. If you're going to submit in September, you need to be just on the final ones in the next few months. And just that they need time. And I think that's the key to all of it more than anything, is they need to be, they need PA time to support you through this. Ash, have you anything else to say?
I was going to say two things. One is exactly as you said about the supervisor doing the supervisor training. Mine came back from her training about 18 months, so she'd done it, and then she updated her training about 18 months before I was due to credential, and she wrote me an email and said, right, I've spent in supervisor training. I'm assuming you've done your academic migration. I'm assuming you've done that because you've done, and sent me a big list of things you need to have done, and when was a bit of a ninja. Her and I have recorded a Teams video that she's essentially giving advice to supervisors, and she's really happy for it to be shared. So if you want that, at the end of the session, I will post a link to the video, which is saved in a Google Drive, so just a link to view the video, and I highly recommend that you share that with your supervisor and that you even watch it together. It's about 25-30 minutes, but it's essentially a consultant talking to your consultant saying, this is what I learned, this is what I would do differently next time. Sorry, dog. I'm just going to quickly answer my door. Julie, do you want to quickly talk about curriculum item ratings, please? Do you mind? Jules, do you mind just quickly doing it?
Yeah. Do you want me to
Yeah, just do your curriculum item ratings that you've done. I've got a few more examples here. Just common versus non-common.
So when you're starting to look at your curriculum item ratings, so as Ash has put up there, that's history taking. So you need to document. So history taking is a skill that you've all probably been doing for numerous years. You've probably been doing it when you've done other roles, the EMP and etc. And that because you've also done a master's in advanced clinical practice or an assessment module, you have then developed that skill further. You want to write in that you with which ticket you're then linking, and why that ticket is the best evidence for that item. So for this one, I can't read on there, but for mine, I would have wrote that history taking in that particular case I used was all to do with the fact that I had to use language line as well to take a really good history on that patient. Ash, do you want to
I'll just put in some different ones on the screen because we haven't got time to talk about all of them. We're sort of really running out of time, but there's so many different options here. You've got your common competencies, and then you've got your procedures, and then you've got your acute presentations, and they all require different levels of curriculum item rating. I think what I would say is my common competency curriculum ratings are the most in depth. And then following on from that, the checklist dependent items, so what we've said, are going to be the best. And then the ones that don't appear on the checklist, so I don't know, weakness and paralysis, you still need a curriculum item rating, but it might be slightly less than what you've done for CC1, and that is okay. And I can share some of these if you send me an email after today, because I appreciate. The only other thing to say is don't forget level 1, 2, 3, and 4 for common competencies only, not achieved, some experience, and achieved for everything else. When you go to the plus sign on Kaizen to create a curriculum item rating, it gives you a whole lot more options than those things. So if you look here, it will give you all these different things. Ignore them all. You just need to do level 1 to 4 for commons, for everything else, achieved, not achieved, and some experience. I can't be any more clear than that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. We've absolutely run out of time spectacularly, and the man has arrived to fix my vent dead on time. Is there anyone else want to add anything, Rachel or Lorella, or is there any burning questions?
Hey Ash, we are on till 12:30. If
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
so we've got some time for some questions.
Yes. In that case, question away. I'll put Slido up as well. Questions, guys? This is your time. You've got half an hour. Just throw some questions out and wait.
Quick question. Can your educational supervisor be the same person as your clinical supervisor?
Yeah, yes, but you don't necessarily need both. So why?
Okay.
Basically,
I'm doing the pediatric only. So obviously we've only got one PEM. So none of the other consultants are particularly happy to kind of get involved. So he's doing both. I was just checking that that's okay.
It is fine, but yeah, basically you just need an education supervisor, and you might have an ACP as your clinical supervisor, but you don't necessarily need both.
Okay.
So basically you can't, but it's not a problem.
Cool.
When they say they're not, sorry, when they say they're not prepared to get involved, the lady who's just spoken.
Not prepared to get involved, but there's 3 of us going for credentialing at the same time, and we're a small DGH, so that they're all obviously exceptionally busy. So they've kind of allocated one to each of us.
Yeah.
And just kind of said your meetings and everything needs to be with your particular. So the only other thing that I was worried about was a lot of my evidence for my consultant CBDs and DOPS is from the same consultant. Do you look at that and frown on that, or is that okay? Some will be different consultants, but most of the stuff, tickets, will be a lot from the same person.
I'm not on the panel, so I don't know the answer to that. I know from my own experience, a lot of mine were done by one consultant, but I really tried, especially in the last 12 months, to try and get ask different people just to do the ticket. So they didn't get involved with some of the other things, but they got involved with, maybe I was on shift with them and I asked them, would they do the mini-kets with me?
Yeah,
so that I got an array of different people. It's not that you're asking them to, to do your supervisor sessions, or, your structured training report, but they could do a DOPS or do a mini-kets with you when you're on the shop floor with them.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Any more questions?
2 more hands up.
Yeah. Anita?
Can I just ask, your final ACATS and ESLI, does it need to be done by your educational consultant? It can be anybody.
How we worked in the hospital I was at when we did ours was my supervisor was given PA time for us, so he did our ACATS and our ESLIs for us, and that was all allocated out. So he was my educational supervisor as well. So that's how we did it. But I'm not, Ash, how was yours done?
I'm not clear on the questioning. Do you mean, do they have to be part of it, or do they have to create the form?
No. Does it, because my previous 2 years of ACATS and ESLIs have been done by my educational consultant, and she was asking whether or not the final one needed to be done by somebody else.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's really good practice to have more people than your education supervisor doing it. Ideally, in an ideal world, you'd have your it's not written down anywhere, your final one would be your supervisor.
Fine.
So, like, for example, in your department, what I did was I had 3 ACATs in total, of which 2 of them were Claire and 1 was a random other consultant who likes doing ACATs. So you've got this good breadth of knowledge of supervision. But in an ideal world, because your supervisor is going to be the one signing you off and saying you are at that level from a teamwork point of view, then the last ones will be done by her.
Fine. Okay, thank you.
No worries. D Hayward 1.
Hi. Sorry, I just got sort of two quick questions. So first of all, with regards to the curriculum item rating, so I, during sort of my ACPU, well, at the end of my ACPU year 1, beginning of ACPU year 2, myself and my educational supervisor went through my entire portfolio and did curriculum item ratings. What was the old like red man, blue man, and there were some things that had already been achieved and were signed off as a level 2. And obviously, yes, I've progressed since then in a lot of ways. I've been going through my portfolio now and looking at what evidence I've got now for those that hadn't been quite achieved or what have you with my current supervisor. My question is, do I need to redo all the curriculum items in sort of your year 3 or what have you? And even if it is that you'd achieve the minimum level, but you're now at level 3, that you still need to go through and get your supervisor to go through them all again?
So yes, so you should be doing all of your curriculum ratings in your last 12 to 18 months. If you did something in year 1 that you had achieved already, it's because I did the same thing. I could almost bet money that you didn't put a comment on, because I didn't know you had to until I got to this point, until I got to the later part of my career. So if you've got a section of your portfolio that just says achieved, signed off by your supervisor with no narrative, that's not enough. Every curriculum item rating has to have a narrative.
Okay. Yeah, I think quite a few of them do have comments, but yeah, I think I'm just gonna work my way through them all again and just make sure that they're exactly what needs to be done based on your examples.
It's a bit frustrating. It's a bit frustrating because you have to, but it's kind of it's really good practice to do that. So what I did with my supervisor is we had a spreadsheet of all the curriculum item ratings, and I would write, I'm happy that all the evidence is there for CC whatever now, and I've done my curriculum item rating to reflect that. And she would then log on and go, okay, I've done mine now, tick, and turn it green.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes
Hi, Ash, if I can just come in there. With the older curriculum item ratings, if you think of it in terms that the credential is confirming that you are currently practicing at the required standard, not 2 or 3 years ago. So it's good to have earlier curriculum item ratings, but the idea of a credentialing portfolio is to demonstrate progress and development. So you're then, it's not, I sort of noted that you said, oh, I got signed off in year 1 or year 2. This isn't like the emergency medicine medical trainee program where you get signed off each year. This is a portfolio where you're developing progression up to a point, at the point of credential where you're demonstrating you're practicing at the required level. So if you think of it in those terms, the older curriculum item ratings will be really useful to show where you were at that point, and then you're adding on evidence, and your curriculum item ratings nearer the time will be sort of demonstrating what you're doing now currently.
Okay, yeah, that makes good sense. Yeah, thank you. And the other thing is a little bit of advice with regards to logbook. So I changed trusts last year, and what's interesting is, although I still had a really good relationship with my old trust, and I still go back there and do like locum and what have you, they've changed their computer system, and unfortunately I wasn't as good as I should have been and kept patient records from my year 1. I've got them from there on their computer system from year 2, but they've changed it. So with regards to logbooking, is there any way I can get around that with sort of a discussion, like my educational supervisor, what have you, at the time reflect and say that I was seeing a varied patient number or anything like that? Because I think that, for me, that's the main thing that's kind of going to delay my going to panel, is to get the patient numbers up to where they need to be, because I didn't get the evidence from year 1 that I kind of should have.
So I think the first thing is there's not a set number in this curriculum. There is in the new curriculum. In this curriculum, we haven't set a number per se. So I guess the question is about how much evidence you've got. Like, for example, how many, like, try and think, if you miss your year 1 data, but since then you've been doing the portfolio for 3 years and you've got 3 years worth of data, then you'll probably be okay. But if you're only going to provide the panel with 8 months of data, then that isn't going to be enough, even with a letter from your supervisor to say she's super good, you know, because it needs to add up. So I think if you're missing a year, just do everything you can to fill that gap. To having a supervisor report for that year one, someone who looked after you in year one, and then with the rest of your time, get as much data as you can.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, can I just come in again from an RChem point of view? Actually, patient numbers are really important. And we do specify within the credentialing guidance, we do have recommended numbers for the 2017 curriculum, and how many, the percentage that should be critically ill or injured and things like that. And the idea of the numbers is to show that you are seeing the breadth of cases, and that, for example, they're not all minors, because that's the easy way to get your patient numbers. So it is really important. And if you have got missing figures from the first year, that may be an issue. Can I ask you to email me, and so that I can have a think about how you can get around that, and have a bit more of a discussion about exactly what sort of figures you've got and what data you've got, because it could be an issue, because there are certain things that we can get around with educational supervisor statements. So if you say, you know, if you haven't got you're seeing resus patients in majors and they're not separated out, then there's certain things that we can, the supervisor can sort of explain to us. But in terms of patient numbers, that's a little bit more difficult. So if we could just have a discussion afterwards, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Lovely. Thank you. Thanks very much, guys.
Lots of hands now. Just go in order of my screen. Simon Tutt next.
Thanks, Ash. I've got two questions about supervisors. So I'm obviously dual credentialing in adult and peds. We don't have any PEM consultants, but obviously my educational supervisor is a full FRChem consultant. They can sign us off for peds, can't they? It doesn't have to be a PEM consultant.
No, exactly. It's only for those people that say you have tickets done by like a pediatrician, for example. Then because they couldn't, because the ED person wasn't there, then there was only a state. But
so I have supporting evidence done by paediatricians on because I did 6 months of general peds as a placement, but all my proper evidence going into the checklist at least will be an FRChem consultant in ED. Okay, so that was the first one, and the other one was the FEGs that need 4 consultants on. Do they have to all be FRChem? Just because obviously I work in a DGH where we have a lot of associate specialists that are on our consultant panel, so we have a couple of FRChems that are on it, but the others are, and they're really supportive of us as well. But obviously, under the new curriculum, they'd be allowed to sign us off. But on the old curriculum, obviously, they're not technically sign off ESs.
Hi, Simon. It'll only be the consultant, the one that's your named educational supervisor who is creating that FEGS and signing it off will need to be the one that has to fit all the eligibility criteria. The rest of the faculty don't have to be FRChem. You'll have a range of faculty. You'll have EM consultants, or they don't all have to be eligible for sign off. Only your named educational supervisor.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because my educational supervisor is just retired and we've just handed over to a new one. So she'll have us for the last year, but the other one's had us for 4 years. So, but they have handed over between them, and I've got like a record of a meeting to finish with one, and we'll have a record of meeting to start with the other. The other one has worked in our department though and has worked with us. So hopefully it will transition well. But
you seems like you've thought of everything, Simon. That doesn't sound.
Just try and cover gaps where I can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Glenn, hello.
Hi. I would just want to ask. I know it says that it's a maximum of 7 bits of evidence for presentations, but say that you've got headache and you've got 3 really good CBDs, Mintex, whatever, and then you've got a bit of reflection. Is that enough if you're covering everything, or does it have to be around 7 pieces? I think everyone's getting a bit confused with that. In my department,
that's the maximum, Glenn, and obviously the minimum. If you look at the first edition of the curriculum that came out, which a lot of people were using for their guidance before the guide came out, it says things like, remember that the non-credentialing items, some parts of the curriculum you can just put e-learning and reflection, you don't have to get a ticket for, in theory.
Yeah.
So there's not, the 7 is the maximum for everything apart from commons, where the maximum is 10 excluding e-learning. There's no other set figures that we put, as long as you can justify to us that you meet that part of the curriculum with your reflections, your clicker marking ratings. If you've got the evidence that is enough, if you think it's enough, then say it's enough, tell us it's enough.
Yeah, just to add, we would say
Great.
if it was less than about if it was less than sort of 3 items, that the panel would be a little bit concerned about coverage. But so you're talking about sort of between 3 and 7 items. And just to reiterate, there was some comments in Slido again. The RChem learning, e-learning modules are not included in that maximum number of pieces of evidence. So you're just looking, so curriculum item ratings aren't included in that maximum because you can have quite a few through your training, and e-learning modules aren't included. But we do say that where you do want to put in e-learning, don't put in more than about a maximum of 5 modules, because if you just cram it with e-learning, they're just going to think it's padding. Again, it's more quantity than quality you're thinking about.
Whoever's not muted, can you please mute the background noise?
Oh, it might be me still. I just had one more question to ask. I know you can link a piece of evidence twice. Is that just to one? The way I read it, I thought that just meant to one common competency and an acute presentation or procedure. But from the way I'm understanding from you, it doesn't have to be a common competency, if you get what I mean.
I'm really confused. Do you mean how many
Sorry.
things link a bit of evidence to?
Yeah, so if I've got a presentation for, I don't know, a guy that's fallen and then has a limb injury, can I link that to 2 things there? Because from the way I've read it, I thought, yes, he could link one piece of evidence to 2 things, but only if one thing was a common competency. Like you couldn't link it to 2. Fine, it doesn't matter what it is.
But really a maximum of 2, yeah.
Great, brilliant, thank you.
Claire.
Hiya, I just wanted to check for the when we were talking about levels, if you went from level 1 to level 3, is it a problem that you've not got anything in level 2 when you're doing your write-ups?
No.
Thank you.
We'd just be interested, we just want you to be minimum level 2 at the point of credentialing, that's all.
Thanks, Rachel. I didn't really quite understand that. I was thinking how to answer that correctly. Does that answer your question, mate?
Perfect, thank you.
Adam's iPhone.
Hiya, yeah, can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, we can hear you, Adam.
Oh, lovely, thank you. I had a couple of questions. So the acute presentations that you can sign off through e-learning, but if e-learning doesn't count, you say you've got 5 e-learning modules in there for your evidence, how do you get around that? Is it through writing reflection and then referencing that in your CIR? Or are you, because some of them it doesn't say you need work-based assessments?
So if it's,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so if it's not one that's if it's not one that's asked for a particular, we haven't mandated a particular assessment, and it can be, you can sort of select what your best evidence will be. If you were just going to use e-learning, that wouldn't be sufficient just to put in a certificate. So it's good as supporting evidence, but as a standalone piece of evidence one particular element, it wouldn't be sufficient. You would need some reflection on how you've applied that to practice after the learning. So we do find that, you know, a few people will just keep sticking e-learning certificates in, and they don't help. They're not that helpful if there's no other reflection or how you've applied that to practice.
I learned this lesson the hard way, Rach. You know, like initially I was doing loads of archive learning, like, and I was only doing the learning sessions, but I always got a certificate for it. I was like, yeah, winning at life here. And then it took me to like halfway through credentialing to realize that, so even what Rachel's saying about the non-checklist dependent items, that wouldn't be enough. But even for the bigger items where you're using e-learning as part of your triangulation of evidence, you need to show some sort of reflection on that learning. I have no idea when you put a certificate in or a link to RChem learning on chest pain that you haven't just gone click, 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 click. What I care about is, do you know, I'm going to think more about dissection when I see a chest pain, or what, you know, even if it's a short reflection. You know, a self-directed learning. I was going to try and go on to Kaizen and see if I could find a section where I'd done the least amount of evidence, but I've still got a triangulation. So if we take the next question, I'll come back to that. Is that all right, Adam?
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, basically, as long as you've got additional reflection or case reflection that draws all of that together, you're learning together, then that's sufficient evidence for those that require.
Yes,
that can be covered by e-learning. Yeah.
With every part of the curriculum, what you're trying to think is, have I assured the panel that I meet all of the curriculum item rating for this, all of the, you know, descriptor for this? And that's all you're doing. You're just, because they don't know you from Adam, so you're just proving to them that you know it. Oh, your name is actually Adam. That's really useful. Should we take Abby's question while I'm looking at Kaizen, and I'll come back to it?
Yeah, sorry, just hopefully 2 short ones. So every time I do a ticket, I always try and link it, you know, wherever it's relevant, and I don't think about what I've already got. So when you come on to the sort of like your, you know, your curriculum stuff, I might have, let's say, 15 tickets in one, but then I pull one down to the level that I've achieved. Do you want me to remove like half of that, so there's only 7 bits in there, and then there's just other stuff floating around my portfolio?
I'm really confused, Abby. I don't understand what you mean. What do you pull where?
So for example, like if I do a ticket and I add all my tags,
yeah,
and let's say I go to my goals and I go to the adult ACP credentialing checklist, I think it is.
Yeah.
And let's say, for example, now on practical procedures or history taking, not practical procedures.
Oh, I get the question. Sorry, your question is,
yes.
Let's take, for example, the credentialing checklist CAP 7, because that's one of the credentialing dependent items.
Yeah.
If you went to CAP 7 in the curriculum, there might be 7 bits of evidence, but in the credentialing checklist, there's only going to be 1. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what I'm asking, because I think I've actually gone through and removed some tickets from something. Let me just go on the
I think, Abby, I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about just not the checklist, you're talking about the curriculum, and you're talking about where we've got level 1, level 2, level 3.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
So that's where you'll link your curriculum item ratings. So when you select the level in your curriculum item ratings, that's where those will be linked. So all your evidence.
So is that I need a maximum of 7 pieces of items in, let's say if I've rated myself at level 3, I need
not 7 pieces under level 3, 7 pieces in total. So in your evidence at the top, so if you do also link stuff to the curriculum, the level 1, level 2, it'll still be in the evidence above. So you're looking at how much evidence you've got in that main evidence section, and that's where you don't want to exceed sort of 7 for
that's fine. So I do need to remove some, but in which case as well, when the people that were switched from the old portfolio, the NHSE portfolio, it's moved those tags over and you can't remove them, so it looks like I've got like 18 bits of evidence in there.
You can, Abby, you can. I'll just speak to you offline, Abby. You can remove them. And also, when you're tagging a bit of evidence, don't tag it to levels and don't tag it to achieved. Just tag it to the part of the curriculum you want to tag it to. It doesn't need to appear in, like, the only thing you will ever select level 1, 2, 3, or 4 is a common competency CIR. That's it. And the only thing you'll ever tick achieved, not achieved in some experience, is an everything else CIR. Everything else that you do in your portfolio, when you tag it, you're just tagging it to the piece of the curriculum that you want to link it to.
Okay. And then just the other question, I think, again, Ash, I might have to just talk to you another time about this, is that new academic declaration.
Yeah.
So are you I'm thinking a bit confused. But you basically want us to copy and paste our module guides?
No, it's not copy and pasting per se, but the academic declaration is asking you to tell the panel why your course meets the outcomes, and the outcomes are listed, aren't they? So on that form it says, does your history, it goes through all the parts of history taking module that it wants you to meet. So where you get that information is your module handbook, the learning outcomes. So you're telling the panel why your course meets the RChem specifications.
Okay, I'll have to email my old uni and get the course handbook, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is something, if you've got your masters already, it needs to be squared away in advance as we can. And it will. It took me 3 hours to do mine. It's a bit of a laborious task. Don't leave it till the last minute.
No worries, thank you.
All right. Just going back to Adam's point from earlier, the one that I've got the least amount of evidence for in my portfolio is pelvic pain, which is one of the CAPs, which is obviously not a checklist dependent item. So in there, I've got a curriculum item rating from me, a curriculum item rating from my supervisor, 1 mini-KEX, 1 self-directed learning reflection, and 1 reflective practice log. And that's it. That's all I've got. And so it's really 3 bits of evidence, but it's a triangulation. It's a reflection, a learning, and a ticket. Makes sense?
Does it have to be a ticket though, Ash? Because in the... No, okay, fine.
It doesn't have to be a ticket, but it has to be. So if you didn't have a ticket for that one, for example, you could have 2 reflections and a learning, but it can't just be a certificate.
Yeah, so it could be an e-learning bit, and then it could be a reflection on e-learning and a case, for example.
Yeah, so I would say if it's a case where you haven't got a ticket, personally, I would do an RChem learning, which I did a self-directed learning form on, so that would appear. The link to RChem would appear, and then I would try and do a patient reflection as well, because then you have ticked it all, the whole triangle off, haven't you?
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Next question. Anybody else?
Can we go to Laura? Wes's had her hand up for a while. Laura,
go for it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm using these headphones. They're a bit, I don't know, not used them before. To be honest, I've just got a couple, my main issue at the moment in terms of heading towards credentialing is there's a lot of kind of like admin issues, which I mean is basically the whole crux of the portfolio. A lot of it is a lot of admin, isn't it, in terms of making sure that you've got the bits and pieces. But I think I've got 2 sort of particular questions. The first one is there's a lot of stuff from when I was first starting to learn about the portfolio when it was NHS e-portfolio. So there's a lot of bits and pieces that where I'd started something, I was just familiarizing myself with the portfolio. And so these things, obviously you can't delete anything, but there's like things that are in my portfolio that have been tagged previously, like Abby was saying, but they might be like half finished, or there's something, it was kind of all when I was just kind of at the beginning of my journey. So that was sort of like more than sort of 5 years ago now. Is it a problem if they're left in there, as long as you can just basically disregard them? Okay, that's good.
The only person it's a problem for, Laura, and I know that I suffer with this really badly. I've got really bad OCD with portfolio and stuff like that. So I spent hours deleting tags on things so that they stopped appearing, unlinking things that they because I wanted, when the panel dropped down whatever part of my portfolio, was really clear what I was linking to that. That's part of the. So if you can't delete something for whatever reason, just there in your curriculum item rating, you might comment on it if you think it's a good one, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, like I think particularly as a lot of us were very unfamiliar with how it's the same with everyone, but unfamiliar with how the portfolio worked and stuff like that initially. So you start kind of doing a reflection, and there's bits and pieces that are kind of all a bit disjointed. So that's fine as long as it's not a massive issue, and as long as you can say, like, as long as if I untag it, then perhaps that might be the best thing to do.
Unlink it, untag it, but also you're normal, but everyone else is, when you first start in the portfolio, it can seem all a bit encompassing.
I think it's only probably in the last year that I've finally got my head around it.
That's fine.
So then the second question I had, my sort of my time in my department has been a bit up in the air, and I've gone through lots of different supervisors. I've had 3 so far. One has then returned now. It was sort of maternity leave and all these kind of different issues. And as a result, like my FEGs and things have not been, that no one had really taken responsibility for sort of getting the FEGs and completing them and everything, but they are available. And I just wondered whether it's, because I think I might have missed this earlier when it was discussed, but with regards to putting stuff into the portfolio at the end and not having one for each year, because I've been an ACP for 5 years, but I don't have FEGs in my portfolio, can they be added in sort of retrospectively but with comment from the supervisor?
I'm going to let Rachel answer that question.
Yeah. Okay. So Laura, again, we might need to have a discussion away just to find out exactly how they've been done, and looking at your prior experience as well, because there's certain times where we will accept less than 3 as long as there's a final one, if you're a really experienced ACP that's been working at advanced practice for a long while, and there's sort of evidence documented of other educational meetings and things like that. Retrospective FEGs and STRs are not helpful.
Oh yeah, sorry, when I say retrospective, I mean more that I would put them, they've been done, but they've been done elsewhere, and they just haven't been put into the portfolio.
Oh,
so
right, okay.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So a lot of my issues are around the admin of like what's actually in the portfolio that isn't there at the moment, but has been done.
Okay, yeah, I think because this is more of a sort of an individual admin issue around your personal portfolio rather than a general question, if we could discuss this off, because I'm just conscious we're coming up to time, just it may not be helpful for others. So if we have that, if you email me, and it goes the same for everyone else, if you do want a discussion, it doesn't have to be by email. If you just contact me by email first, and I can, we can arrange a time to call if you've got any questions. And also just before, just take the last 2, just to say, we'll keep Slido open for a little while. So if you've got any other questions, can you put them into Slido that haven't been asked here? Don't put them in the chat here, because it's really hard to look back through questions on the Zoom chat. So if you could put them on the Slido, and then I'll collate them into subjects and we'll send them out to you all. And as I said, if you've got individual questions, my email's in there, you can contact me. I can arrange a phone call if you need to.
Absolutely. Kerry and Adam, one last question each, just for the people that want to stay on and hear these. If not, feel free to drop off, people. It's all good.
Mine was a very quick question. You talked about if you send a ticket and you supervisor put some action points at the bottom, because you can't, on the portfolio, I find it really difficult because you can't link a reflection, can you? So the reflection form, you can't link that to a ticket, so you then have to go and do something like an external reflection form and link all that. The comment box at the bottom of a ticket, so if there's action points and then there's a comment box, can you go back into that and just say I've completed this RChem learning? Yes. And I feel like, would that count as, and then I could link the RChem learning, and that would be a triangulation. Is that enough?
Yeah. And exactly what you describe is really useful for other people. So there's 2 ways to do it. One, as you said, is banging. You can do a comment, and you can say, because the reflection you do on that subject, on that RChem learning they've asked you to do, will still appear. It won't link to the ticket, but it will still appear under CC7 or whatever the item that you linked it to, curriculum item rating that you linked to, it will still appear there. If you're really, really, really OCD, you can do the reflection on Kaizen, and you can download PDF, and you could upload that to your library, and you can link that to a form, because you can attach things to forms only if they're in your library. If you're
okay,
but a comment is fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Done the work.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And today's been really useful. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Adam, last one, dude.
Yeah. Audit. So I did 2.
Ending on audit? No way.
Yeah. So I've done two audits over 3 years, then failed my portfolio, took 18 months out. I'm redoing it now, or just sort of like trying to get it through now. But obviously audit is a lot of work, and I've done 2 over 3 years. Can I just put in my curriculum item rating that I've continued to be involved in audit, blah, 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 or do I need to do another audit?
I was going to offer to Rachel, my gut feeling is no, you don't have to do another one as long as you can justify the roles you've had in those audits, and if they were good evidence. So when you submitted last time, if they didn't comment on your audit and your feedback, then it was probably okay, would be my gut feeling. Rachel?
It depends what kind of, if you had an unsuccessful outcome, we don't identify every single area in a portfolio, because we found that it tended to then become a tick box exercise, and if you were failed again on something that wasn't mentioned on that list, you know, you could come back to us and say, well, you didn't highlight that before. Can I just ask Adam, it's fine not to have another audit, but it will depend on the audits that you have got. Have you, the most important thing, as we said right at the beginning in the top tips, is about completing the audit cycle and the re-audit. So you've got to have your audit, you've got to have, you know, your recommendation, you've got to have evidence of, you know, some reflection, the re-audit, you know, it's got to be that full audit cycle rather than just the initial audit. So if you've got all of that, then that will be fine. You don't need to complete a new one. It would have to be the whole thing.
Yeah, just, I think you have to go with your gut, Adam. If you think it's enough and it's a good audit, and it probably is, just do a repeat reflection on where you are now with your audit journey, that you're in a new hospital and, you know, and a new curriculum item rating is what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool. Sounds good.
That's probably it for questions. We've gone over a little bit. I want to apologise for some of the techie issues we've had today. That is, a lot of it's my fault, but a lot of it's just tech and disruption. So sorry, and thank you for bearing with it. I hope it's been useful. This has mostly just been us kind of trying to share our tips with you, because we get so many questions. Julie and I are both super happy to be contacted. We're going to put our emails in the chat. Like, you can email us with any questions. We can't always give you the answer. We can't always tell you exactly what to do, but I want to leave you with the sort of leaving point is that RChem and us and the panel really want everyone to get through, because we need more people credentials. So it does sometimes feel like a bit of a tick box exercise. The reason it feels like that is because you guys all want people to say, I'm an RChem ACP, I've gone through the process, I've been assessed. It's not about what other people think of you, and people might think, oh, you're a really good chum, you're a really good egg. Anita, you're a really good egg, you are, as a paramedic in ACP, but you move to department somewhere else, you tell someone online, I'm an RChem ACP, we have to have a standard. My watch doesn't understand, but that's where we're at. So thank you. Julie, do you want to add anything, mate?
Go away today and just re-look at your portfolios, look at your evidence that you've got, try and just do a quick checklist. In my suggestion to people is to try and put 3 pieces of evidence even to everything, more to the ones that are on that checklist. If you can get a case-based discussion in there, I think that's really helpful, along with some reflection.
Yeah, I think that's really.
And contact me. Anybody can contact me. Try and find yourself a buddy who's either in your area or your local hospital, because that's really helpful. And I know in the Northwest there aren't many of us, so you know, if you want to contact me, if you're from the Northwest, it's absolutely fine, or anywhere else. Just, you might just need a one-to-one with people just to go through some sticking points that you've got, and you can share your own portfolios with them.
Yeah, go away. Sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, Ash, I was just about to say something to finish on, just about how your portfolios are reviewed, because I think you know, there's kind of a sort of a feeling. I get lots of questions saying, okay, if I haven't got this particular thing or this specific piece of evidence, am I going to fail? And it's really difficult to say. So what I would say, and what I tell everyone, is that your portfolios are looked at as a whole. it's not a tick box exercise. So the panel will get a general feeling as they're reading about the standard. And if there's a couple of pieces of evidence that are not quite as good, but the rest of your portfolio is fantastic, you'll be fine. There's also some types of evidence that are weighted more heavily than others. So if you've got, so you really want to concentrate on your checklist items, they're the ones that are going to be really getting you through credentialing. The rest of the curriculum obviously is really important, but they will not be looking at every single piece of assessment. They want to see that you've got a good breadth and depth of the curriculum. And what I say, it's not an exam, so you don't have to get 100%. No one's asking you to get 100%. So, and there may be things where you'll talk to colleagues and one will say, well, I got through with this bit of evidence and you didn't get through on that bit of evidence. But it may be that the rest of their portfolios, the one that did get through, the rest was brilliant, and the panel feel they're always looking, they're your peers, they're credentialed ACPs, they're EM consultants, they're all supervisors. They really want you to get through, and they know what it's like working in a department. So they'll look at your evidence and they'll think, well, is there any benefit of getting this ACP to do another 6 months? Is that going to get them to be a more reflective practitioner? You know, it's really, you know, individual portfolios. So just try not to compare too much. If you haven't been successful and your colleague has, and you're sort of comparing it, they really do look at it as a whole. And it's a big panel. There's about 40 members now, so they are really thoroughly reviewed. So just to let you know, and again, we don't know you. We all know you're practicing at a certain level because you're ACPs, but you've got to kind of think of it as if you're going for an interview in your own trust. You've still got to say everything, even though they know you. So you've just got to put that evidence in. But thank you all for coming, and yeah, I hope that's been useful.